Hello, this is Mary Wingo, and I am broadcasting from beautiful Cuenca, Ecuador, which is one of the most beautiful spots, beautiful cities on the planet. And maybe someday you can visit beautiful, incredible, magical, mystical Ecuador. Okay, so you have become familiarized a little bit with the concept of stress, of how I present stress. I'm going to give you a little bit of a lecture here. Lecture. Don't think I'm lecturing you about what stress really is and why I have decided to really commit my life to educating the public and also public health officials and also community political leaders as much as I can about the epidemic of preventable stress in modernized cultures. It's not just American cultures, European, Canadian, Australian. It's all there's some there. We can discuss the reasons later, but this is an epidemic present in just about all modernized societies and in emerging. We don't want to call them third world. That's not really an accurate term, but in emerging countries where you have a lot of modernization as well, may not be universal. You're seeing stress-related diseases spike as well, and stress-related disability and early death spike as well. So, I mean, I guess the thing we need to ask ourselves, okay, this is really interesting stuff. Why? I mean, in so-called modernized society, I mean, we're supposed to have it made, right? I mean, we're supposed to have, have access to the best, medicine around. We have beautifully engineered food. Well, that's not everywhere. Engineered foods, Franken foods in America, and in some other places. But I mean, still, but what is it, that is causing the just massive parabolic increase in stress-related illness, disability, and early death? Well, that's a real complicated question. I tell you what, how about I define stress for you first, okay? Because believe it or not, we scientists, despite studying the devil out of stress, the topic of stress just in these sciences is well over 100,000. Over the last 150 years. And this may cross over into some psychology, but it sure as heck doesn't include, if how we study humans, how humans have been studied in groups. So that would be sociology or the economics. That's not including that. We're not including what studies have been done on political systems under stress. We're just talking the biology and maybe a little bit of the psychobiology of stress. So this has been studied to death. And what has kept stress in the sort of, we call it woo-woo realm, is because it is, take this home with you, it is the most complicated field in science, okay? Why? Why is it? Because the way that it has been studied, we're talking about basic, first off, the stress mechanisms, okay? You've heard of Charles Darwin, right? And you've heard of natural selection, variation. He realized, and this is here in the Galapagos, but it was the Galapagos is part of Ecuador, where he got his insights. But he realized that there was some sort of mechanism in these, organisms that forced change in order to adapt to the environment. Okay, so in one island, a particular finch might be one color. In another island, not that far away, it might be a different, in order, over the millennia to adapt to whatever specific pressures that environment was presenting. So basically, it's taken like almost 200 years. But those mechanisms of adaptation have been a little bit elusive. When it comes to understanding, it's almost 200 years have gone by. I mean, it's been studied. Well, let me lay this to rest, okay? Okay, so you got your notes out. Let's start taking notes, because this is something you want to remember. Stress is the rate of adjustment that we're going to talk about humans, but it's all living organisms, that we humans undergo in order to adapt to whatever the environment's throwing at us, okay? So an easy example I always use, so it's not always just mental stress. Like, for instance, if you go from, like, say, living at sea level to living very, very high altitude, the minute you get off the plane, and if you're like high, say you're, anywhere from, 2,500 meters, which would be about 8,300 feet, and you're coming from sea level, okay? Now, you know that the oxygen is much thinner at 8,300 feet, 2,500 meters. Okay, so, but you don't die. You don't turn blue and suffocate. What happens? What happens? Your body undergoes a phase shift, and this phase shift, this is the stress response. Okay, so this is a phase shift that helps it reorganize itself. And in this case, reorganize itself to better utilize oxygen and to, if we can, capture more of it, okay, in order to adapt at the higher environment. So there's a reorganization of tissue, and after a while, you're suffering. Well, sometimes you still suffer. I'm not sure if Caucasians are meant to, be up this high in the Andes. But you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. If you go from like a very humid climate to a bone-dry desert, your kidneys, as well as your circulatory system, undergoes very substantial changes in order to conserve water. So you're not, sweating and peeing, all your fluids out. You conserve it, okay? So, there's a bajillion other, this is live, so there's a bajillion other examples. And we can also include, so these are stressors, but we can also include stressors because we are humans and we have such enormous brains. We have such enormous frontal lobes that makes us very vulnerable. We've got great computing power. As you can tell, we're rulers of the planet. Whether you like it or not, for the good or for the bad. But what has given us this, okay, is our ginormous new part of the brain that's right under the skull. And then what really kind of gives us that juju that truly makes us king of the animals is this part, the frontal lobe, okay? And this is for humans and other advanced animals with frontal lobes. This is our primary stress response organ, okay? So for whatever reason, when we got this, because in most animals, this is really small, okay? This, for us, this is gargantuan. Having foreheads like this is gargantuan. You notice in cats and dogs, their little foreheads are much, tinier, okay? And that's because they just don't have the frontal lobe. Well, the frontal lobe is our major stress response organ, and it's very vulnerable to stress itself. It's, what happens if we damage our frontal lobe or if we mess it up? Well, our ability to adapt to stress just falls to almost nothing, okay? And I'll go in. I have some other videos that talk about this, but I'll make more videos about the frontal lobe that go into even deeper detail. So the frontal lobes are our primary stress response, our adaptation. Okay, and it's what has made us a king of the animals, animal kingdom, and it's what allows us to form complex societies, monetary systems, governments, accounting, organization, creativity, technology, all that stuff comes from somebody's frontal lobe, or collective frontal lobes working together. So you can see the frontal lobe, when we have a stress response, see, there's two things that can happen, okay, during a stress response. You have a stressor coming at you. You can do one of two things. So we'll just say this. Say the stressor is being very cold outside, okay? Well, okay, as humans, we're pretty lucky, right, on how we can deal with this. There's two options, okay? The first, more primitive option is the body immediately contends, well, how do I change myself, just like with going to the desert or going to high altitudes, in order to survive in this environment? Okay, so, or with this little thing right here, we can then do the opposite. How can we change the environment so that we're not as stressed, so we don't have to undergo the same amount of stress? Think about this. Okay, are you taking this down? I mean, this is good stuff. Okay, so basically, what the frontal lobe does is it allows us to explore the environment and manipulate it so that we don't have to experience the stress. So, for instance, we make clothing. Ta-da! Okay, put on some clothes. Create a coat. Now you notice, besides what nature gave them, animals don't usually make coats and scarves. Or, I mean, a lot of them make shelters, but man, we've got sophisticated shelters where we can, have fire inside. We can be baked Alaska. I mean, I want you to think about this. Think about this, okay? And so this is what's made us. I mean, again, we're going back to Charles Darwin. This is what has made us so successful, evolutionarily speaking, okay? But unfortunately, our primary stress response organ is very, very fragile, and it's very unstable, and it's quirky because it comes in new. It's not an old part of the brain. This is very, very new. So it's quirky. It's like a new piece of technology. It's like a new Apple iPhone when it first comes out, and there's like 1 billion bugs in it. Except Apple can actually work out the bugs with us. And, good luck working those bugs out. But it's very fragile to stress, including chemical stress. Why? I'll just give you an example. What's it, okay, like what I said before, what's it like to lose access to your frontal lobe? Will ever see a person drunk? I'm just saying, or on various types of drugs, and lose their concentration, maybe lose control of their emotions, not think things through clearly. And like, what? What are you talking about? You're crazy, Well, that's what, and this is very human. So I'm not going to make a pathology of something that's human. I'm just saying that this is part of being human, and this is how you can identify in yourself when your poor frontal lobe is under too much stress. Do you start losing your temper? If you're like on some sort of self-improvement, like you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to break some habit, you're trying to be better, okay? And maybe you have a real stressful day where all your resources up here. See, this is finite. You can't just be scheming and plotting and executing and being all abstract and planning all the time, scheming all the time. You can't be in full control. There comes a point where even James Bond will lose his cool, right? I mean, even Spock, will lose his cool. And when you lose your cool, that is an indication like, this is getting taxed. I'm snapping, I'm not concentrating. And you notice when you become like that, you're unable to deal with stress. It's very impaired, and that it indeed cascades and often causes more stress. Okay, so one thing that just, I don't know, seems lost to our society, but this is a very well-studied phenomenon, is the self-care of the frontal lobes. There are many reasons in modernized society that we over attack. I mean, the brain is like a muscle, okay? And again, the more you use it, the stronger you get. But then if you just use it, it fatigues like every other organ. Okay, just think of it like a muscle. So you don't take it so personally. You don't think it as moral failings or anything like that. It just, there's only so much you can self-control. You can control your outbursts, your moods, your thoughts, planning for the future, keeping track of lots of little details, multitasking, constantly checking your device. Well, for whatever reason, well, it's not really whatever reason, for obvious reasons, over time, it depletes, okay? And we all know that with high stress, oftentimes comes high cortisol. And in times of low to moderate cortisol, and you're healthy, your frontal lobe, bam, comes on, and man, you are sharp, and again, you are solving those problems, and you are a power man, power woman, you concentration sharp, no ADD, that kind of thing. But then when it hits high levels, especially when it stays elevated for a long period of time, your body goes into conservation mode, conservation of energy, because obviously it thinks it's in hell. It's like, oh, there's no stability here. So you have the high cortisol, and then what it does, your body goes into conservation. And this is not necessary for eating or breathing or anything like that. I mean, you can live without your frontal lobe. It's not a very good life, but you can, but we're talking like just your basic animal functions. Okay, so it goes off, and so you really lose your concentration then. And then over time, tissue can atrophy. Your memory centers there can atrophy. And again, so you could see where one thing leads to another. And you can go from being a very together person to, well, what happens? I mean, it's not just concentration. If you've got, genetic vulnerability. See, the genes load the gun, but maybe the environment pulls the trigger. So for some people, it could be loss of, inhibitions, like whatever they're addicted to and they're trying to stop, they fall back off the wagon. I mean, there's a million examples of addictions for that. Other people, it's various mental, their response to stress is to experience feelings of anxiety or depression. Other people might be mania. Again, depending on your individual twist, of genes, vulnerability, whatever. Again, it's not 100%. It's somewhere about 50-50, about 50%, usually speaking, about 50% more or less nature, 50% nurture, 50% what we can do with our environment. So 50% biology, 50% environment, including us, including our own voluntary abilities, to change things. So, you can imagine how we're just like constantly busy all the time. And you can imagine that if you're a workplace that really drains people's frontal lobe, it's called executive memory abilities, then you can imagine that mistakes are going to occur, and your business expenses are going to go through the roof. Well, I'm just using that as an example. This could be in your own life, in your own household. Okay, we're not even talking just business. Stress, people who are under stress, a lot of times have money problems. Okay, and sometimes even if they're making a lot of money, because stressed people, life just gets more expensive, okay? This is just reality, okay? So life can get a lot more expensive. It can, like for instance, the more stressed you are, the more you're going to have to depend on the medical system. For stress-related illness, or whether it's stress, vulnerability to infection, autoimmune, type 2 diabetes, type 1 would be part of autoimmune, various other pulmonary, endocrine issues related to stress. Just the fact that you have to take off of work and go to the doctor, whether I mean, whether you're not losing pay from work, or maybe you're one of the few lucky people that are fully insured and don't have to pay for the doctor. But my God, if in many parts of America, a lot of people lose out on both. So you can see how being under chronic stress is impoverishing, okay? And it causes economic and social instability. So it's the rate of adjustment, okay? And this is just tiny scratching the surface, okay? Now, okay, what I want to go into right now. So if you have not taken my completely free, totally free, your information is secure, don't worry. But if you need to take my online stress evaluation system, because what you have to do, if you haven't already, and if hopefully you've gotten your results, and you can identify problem areas. What you need to do, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is go to my site, marywingo.com, and take this if you haven't. If you have taken it, and to recap what this is basically an inventory of your very common life stressors, okay? And through many thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of studies, there are certain stressors that are more effective than others. I mean, that are more, I should say, potent and potentially destructive. I mean, like for instance, losing a spouse is going to be more stressful than sitting in traffic. Okay, getting exposed to pollution may be more stressful than hearing crying noisy babies. And again, it depends on the frequency. So you have the stressors, and are they repetitive, and the frequency. So this stress evaluation system attempts to, if anything, just identify, because a lot of people, if they're trying to itemize their own stressors, they're going to miss out on probably 90%. They'll list 4 or 5 when probably a typical person has well over 100 stressors. Okay, so the key is, and why? I mean, why do I need to rehash some of these traumatic? Some of them are traumatic. I mean, especially in part of the inventory where I ask about childhood abuse, but understand this carries on 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. Understand, okay, this is another thing I want you to write down, okay? Understand that stress is additive, okay? It is additive, okay? So this is what science has shown us, okay? We're taking stress management out of the woo-woo, and we're putting it into hardcore, studied to death, in the scientific investigation realm. Stress is additive, okay? And the more stressors that you have piled up, especially like life-changing, earth-shattering, losing your house, losing your spouse, losing your child, type of stressors, really severe, horrific, especially when they get piled up. If you have those piled up in a very short period of time, one after another, and a lot of times these things happen, your risk of early death or stress-related illness, disability, goes to the roof, okay? So this is actually what this is a risk assessment, okay? So in these, and you have risk assessment like for instance, if, for other things, you have risk assessment if you don't wear your helmet, okay? What is the the chance that you might suffer a fatal car, if you have a wreck, if you don't wear your seatbelt, it's the same thing. There are risk assessments, people who smoke. Oh boy, that's been studied. And that's also another stressor. So, but the study of stress is so complex that we've only up until now been able to get our minds over just little parts of it, okay? But ultimately, one thing that comes out is stress is additive. Okay. And in order, and if are suffering from horrific amounts of stress. I mean, you know it, but you need to know that your body's giving you a signal, and you're gonna need to decrease the amount of stress that is in the actual number. So you've itemized them, and you're gonna need to go through and say, oh, okay, and eliminate the easy ones. Okay, so there's a lot of, like, for instance, for a lot of people, removing a lot of industrial chemicals from their house that they're exposed to. I mean, these are stressors. I mean, you might not think that the million cleaning supplies that you have under the sink for the last 15 years, or in, your bathroom, just maybe even leaching out of the containers, have no effect. Well, they do. They are a stress. I mean, that's just simple little things. Of course we can meditate. Of course, we can take out processed food. And hopefully Frankenstein food, because those modernized culture and the fast food, the really, really toxic fast, I'm telling you, has done a number. I mean, it's not just obesity, but it's also messed up our friendly gut organisms, our microbiome, which they are extensions. They do so many biological functions, like make vitamins and regulate your immune system, regulate wound healing, regulate, neurotransmitters, okay? So also regulate your frontal lobe, so they're important for you. Believe it or not, not just gut, but it's not just your gut. It's all over. It's in all your orifices, okay, including the unmentionables. It's in your skin. I mean, it's eyes, eyelids. You have all these friendly, we call it commensal friendly organisms that, that basically form sort of like a second skin. Okay, it's actually a functional body part. That our systems become very sick and stressed if those get disrupted. And a lot of the chemicals that we're around, and a lot of, the various foods we eat, of course. But then we have to look at, also, you need to put your damn phone down. I'm just saying, when you're having to check your phone, I mean, when you're constantly engaging, see, you have to have some period every day where you can just kind of like not have to concentrate and not be staring at some sort of electronic device, including a TV. I mean, these are small things. It doesn't cost a penny, but you would be surprised how much bandwidth these rob. I mean, so think of this. Think as if, your body under a lot of stress is like this grand, rickety old house that has a lot of potential, but it's got a lot of leaks, okay? Now, some of the big stressors that you have, like for a lot of you, like work stress or major relationship stress, you may not be able to change. But if you've got like 25 other smaller stressors that you can change, it will take the weight off the bandwidth and allow your body some breathing room. I know that this is a totally new concept, but it's extremely important that you take this home and, somehow find a way to inventory your stressors. And then whatever way, now, you can do it yourself. A lot of people do. You can go to a therapist and, do like you would with smoking. Some people need to do it by themselves. Go to a therapist, go to some sort of a group, self-help group. There's, you can, of course, there's professionals, including me, you can come to. But the key is to systematically it's basically simplify your life. And I know this for a fact. I've got an extremely, you would not believe how simple my life is. Done a lot of moving parts. But I've also, just for myself, reversed some very, very major stress-related long-standing illness and problems with this, and it's something that people, it's people friendly. It's something, you don't have to be rich to do this. I mean, you don't have to have a dime in your pocket. Um, this is something for the people, okay? But, and I've got a lot more to talk about, but we're going on 30 minutes. We're going on 30 minutes. We haven't even scratched the surface. Don't think that you know everything yet. It goes very, very, very deep. It goes very, very far, and I could probably do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos looking at stress from every angle possible. So we're just starting. And what else can I say? Well, visit my website, marywingo.com. Please subscribe to my channel. Please, please, please. And if you haven't had a chance, go ahead, go to marywingo.com and click the banner and go ahead and see what your stress levels are. Thank you very much. Have a great day.